What's going on? Dylan Conrad, Metabolic AF, where my whole mission is to teach you how to lose 1 to 3 pounds of fat per week without ever having to track another calorie. Again, I'm Dylan Conrad, I'm your host. And today we're going to be talking about how to blast menopause belly in 90 days. Before I get into that, if you watch this on YouTube, please like, subscribe, turn notifications on, Spotify, iTunes, bell button, algorithm, boom, boom, boom. Bell button, subscribe, leave a review. All appreciated. All right, so menopause belly, right? Well, let me start with a very quick story. So, client Sharon, Colorado, postmenopausal, and she, from her progress pictures, just, she had body fat, but most of it was stored predominantly in the stomach. And that's what happens postmenopausal as your estrogen and your progesterone just go to zero because your reproductive hormones are going to zero, your LH and your FSH. And so what happens is your leptin is a lot different. Your ghrelin's a lot different. So your hunger hormones, where you're storing body fat. So you get these intense cravings. You start storing body fat in your stomach, and it's no buenos, right? So two things that usually happen, and this is what was happening with Sharon, is that she was a travel nurse, and so I think she had to work, drive an hour to and from, and then work really long shifts, and she was just going through some stuff just mentally, and wasn't eating horrible, but really wasn't eating in a way that was going to be conducive to her losing body fat. Not only that, but she wasn't doing the right things when she was doing the correct things, right? So she was just really focused on eating clean foods, which we know from the fat loss hierarchy, the thing that matters least is the type of food that you're eating, right? I'm not saying that does not matter at all. Don't get me wrong, the type of food that you do eat does matter, but focusing on that as your primary way of losing fat without focusing on protein intake, calorie intake, all that stuff, you are never going to see any fat loss, okay? 3 things that are happening with menopause. 1, you're becoming more insulin resistant, okay? So the luteal phase, which is the second phase of when you have a regular menstrual cycle, quote unquote regular, right? Because there's no real regular time. Between 24 and 32 days. The last phase, that is when you are more insulin resistant. So in menopause, you are representing a luteal phase physiology. And so insulin resistance, very high. Insulin resistance basically just means you're storing you're storing carbohydrates as fat instead of energy, right? When you're insulin sensitive, which is the opposite, which means that you're taking up carbohydrates very easily and you're storing them as energy instead of fat, okay? That's the difference between insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance. So you become more insulin resistant, and when you're in menopause, the other thing that happens is your metabolism does downregulate quite a bit, okay? And so that's another thing that happens during menopause. And the last thing that happens is what I already kind of described is menopause belly, right? Like body fat being congregated mostly in the stomach area or just different areas that you never really restored them before. So how do we blast this in 90 days, and how does Sharon blast this in 90 days? Well, gave her a step count. That's number 1. That's going to be the best thing for bringing up your metabolism, right? Aside from the reverse diet, what I call the metabolic priming system, which is structurally, strategically bringing your food up over time, boosting your metabolism. The other thing that's going to boost it really, really easily is getting on a step count. So tracking your steps, okay, and logging her food. That is literally all she did, okay? And why did logging her food work? 1 is because we can adjust for her metabolic downregulation. So there's a certain intake that would put her in a calorie deficit and allow her to lose body fat. The other thing is we were allowed to set her protein, carb, and fat, make sure she was getting 0.6 to 1.1 grams of protein. Okay, I had a little technical difficulties, but I'm back here. So I think I was talking about the protein, carb, and fat ratio. So tracking her macros and logging her food allowed us to set her carbohydrates to make her more insulin sensitive, right? And so we were able to moderate carbohydrates a little bit lower and prioritize fats. Basically like 35% of overall intake was fats, and then whatever was left over on carbohydrates was that moderate to low intake of carbs, which are going to be conducive to creating more insulin sensitivity in that regard. So we were able to create a fat burning machine, getting around 1-3 pounds per fat loss per week. I think she lost 25 pounds in 12 weeks, which was freaking awesome, especially postmenopausal when it does become harder. So for her, it was a combination of lifestyle adjustments. So we also had to, figure out what was going on, what was causing her to kind of fall off when she was, and really just getting her consistent. And the other thing was just making sure she was on the right plan with moderate carbohydrates, making sure she's tracking step, getting her metabolism up. And then eventually we did take her through a reverse diet or metabolic priming system. So that's what we did with her, and that's how you can blast menopause belly in 90 days. I'll put her progress pictures up so you guys can see those. But very impressive. You can see most of the body fat on the stomach was completely eliminated just by taking these 2 steps: walking, tracking her food. Okay, so if you are a postmenopausal woman, perimenopausal, whatever it is, 2 things you can do right now: track your steps and track your food, and that's it. So anyways, love y'all. Have a great rest of your day, and see you next time.